Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Broman Clash, and tonight I want to talk about a topic that has been on my mind for quite some time, ever since I was like a teenager, or even ever since I was like an adolescent, somewhere around like 11 or 12. And it's been something that even my own teacher said, like, there's a difference between doing something and doing nothing. And I've always thought, like, a good student should always do nothing unless the teacher tells them what to do. And then they say, and I remember a teacher would say, like, what are you doing? And if you reply nothing, some of them would say, okay, but others would be like, that's the problem. Now, this connects into what the topic really is, and that's the difference between what's the difference between being submissive and being good. See, submissive and good are two entirely different things, even though nowadays people seem to believe that being submissive and being good are one and the same. But by definition, they're different because being good means you have like desirable traits. You know what's right. You know what to do. And not only that, you'll do it and it's morally in the right instead of what is, basically the law. And if the law is corrupt, then you have every right and the moral good to combat those laws. But submissiveness or submission is basically like it's something like the total opposite because by definition it means to, basically give up your own will or to give up power to another or to submit. For some religions, that's a good thing, and I understand because that's how the way they do things. But when it comes right down to power, when it comes right down to actually laws, when it comes right down to all that other stuff, now I want to talk about that because it kind of connects with today's times. Because it's just like, wait a minute, are people actually being good or are they being submissive? That's the question you should ask yourself. Because if you ask, oh, what's the difference between good and submissive? Like I gave the definition right like a minute or two back. So basically, the difference is because you can be submissive and give in to evil. You can be submissive and give in to good. Submission or being submissive means that you basically give up your own will or you give up something in order to be a part of something. But being good doesn't necessarily mean you have to give up anything. In fact, there are certain traits where you have to be good, but then you might lose something. That's not the same as like giving up something, losing some. Because as you grow older, you tend to gain things, and in an equal sense, you also lose things. But how's this connected to today's times? Well, think about the protests that are going on, and also Colin Kaepernick. Think about those. Think about how those two connect together. See, look, what they want. See, look, the difference is, see what some white Americans want, or the ones that, yeah, white Americans, quote unquote, patriotic blacks, patriotic Hispanics, patriotic Asians, patriotic people who love America would want to say, like, see what Colin Kaepernick is doing is not right. It's not good. It's wrong. And the thing is, what they don't want Colin Kaepernick to be good. They want him to be submissive, which means, to be passive, not to be, overall just a fighter. See, when you do good, you realize that there's a struggle to fight, and you realize that you have to do something in order to make things right. See, good and right go hand in hand. But some people think submission or being submissive is good because it benefits them. But good benefits everyone, meaning that everyone is, happy, everyone is stable, everybody is just overall having a good time. That's just it. But then here's where things get real complicated. For example, All Lives Matter, that bullshit ass group. They always talking about all lives matter, but yet for some odd reason you hear crickets when there are white people being killed by the cops. But then you got Black Lives Matter saying like, yo, these white folks were being killed right there too. These brown folks were being killed right here too. Man, these Asian folks were being killed by the cops too. So what about them? Are we really all lives matter? Even though we say Black Lives Matter, we know all lives matter. But for some odd reason, people just seem to forget that, like, oh, Black lives, why should they matter? That's the reason why some activists are actually doing good, while some of them are just running their mouths. And you may say, but bro and Clash, you're doing the same thing too. To that, I will say, you're also right, and you could be also wrong. Because if you really think about it, being good, you gotta notice what's wrong. You gotta notice what's bad. You gotta notice what's really going on. But if you're submissive, you'll just toss everything out. You just look towards the other way. You won't like just be like, you know, this whole Black Lives Matter shit is bullshit. It's been going on for years. It's just that the reason why, you know, Black Lives Matter is it's nothing new to me is because it's been going on for years. It's just that it went under different names. You know, there's the Black Liberation Movement. There was the Black Panthers. You know, because this year is the 50th anniversary since their founding in Oakland, California. And, you know, the Civil Rights era, you know, during the Reconstruction era, and then there, well, you know, parts of it, you know, like with Tulsa, Oklahoma, and, you know, black people actually in America actually owning and accumulating wealth. And then, you know, there was the Nat Turner Rebellion, and, you know, what was going on with Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and with Frederick Douglass. And not only that, with Pan-Africanism with Marcus Garvey. Now, you see how all those tied together to Black Lives Matter because they're talking about how the way they could save black lives because they noticed that there was something going on. And you may say like, oh, some of them will even look at Dr. King and say, oh, Dr. King will support like all lives matter. Let me tell you something, man. Dr. King knew what was really going on. And this still ties into my topic of what's the difference between good and submission or submissiveness. See, Dr. King was not submissive. He was a good man. Sure, back then or even to this day, I might say like Dr. King, he was all about peace and he wasn't like really as radical as Malcolm X. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Dr. King. Good man. Loving heart. Compassionate. Love his people. That's what ultimately makes him a good man. And not only that, he knew what the hell was up. And a lot of these people who try to submit people or try to make them submissive by saying like, oh, Dr. King would not agree with Black Lives Matter. Dr. King would not agree with, you know, what's going on nowadays. Dr. King would not even agree with like, you know, the protests and, you know, the riots that's going on in the United States, especially with black folks. But let me tell you something. He was down with black rights. He was down with workers' rights. He was down with doing the right thing, which is good. You may say, oh, but what about, you know, we all must come together as brothers or we'll perish as fools. Man, if you stop using Dr. King's name as a way to make people submissive, you will realize that Dr. King said basically the same things that were being said today. He knew what was going on. Even he said, I'm afraid I've integrated my people into a burning house. Now think about it like that and how this ties into with, you know, good versus submission versus submissiveness. See now, when you do good versus submissiveness, you realize that they are entirely different. But some people think they are the same. That's not good. Now, like I mentioned before, you know, with the protests and how the way they have a legitimate point. You know what was going on in Ferguson, what was going on with Michael Brown, what was going on with Laquan McDonald, and what was going on with Porn Gaines, and what was going on with Philando Castile, and what was going on now with Terrence Crutcher, and what's going on with that young white, you know, a young white boy with autism who was 6 years old who was shot up by the cops. I mean, the young boy was 6 years old. Come on. And these are police officers just pow, 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 pow. Like, who are they submitting to? Why would they do such a heinous act? That young man, Dave, was probably was more than likely just a good kid. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just in a car, and they riddled the car with bullets. And Terrence Crutcher, good man. Even though he submitted and had his hands up, and I could tell he was a good man. Just for them to say like, oh, he looks like a bad dude, other than because of his skin color, like, let's keep it real here. Submission is also mental, just like good is mental as well. See, when you submit to an idea, when you submit to an ideology, or when you submit to like a way of thinking, you're not really doing good. In fact, you're destroying the very same thing that could create unity. And then once, like I repeat, once unity becomes destroyed, it's either you will understand what true good is or what's just submission. Now, why is it important to know the differences, between these two words? Honest, and like I mentioned before, it is because people got two of these things confused. And I gave you the definition like a few minutes back on like what's the difference between both of these words. Now, like I mentioned before about Colin Kaepernick and how the way he was doing good by actually just saying, wait a minute, why am I standing up for like a national anthem? Why? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to stand up for an anthem, especially when people, black people, brown people, hell, even some white people getting shot up. Let's not forget about Asian people and, the indigenous people getting shot up. For what? Just for standing up for what the hell they believe in? Isn't that what good is? When you realize something's up and when you realize there's evil around, when you realize that there's, bad going on and people are submissive and they don't do anything. And then Colin Kaepernick just said, you know what? Nah, I'm not going to stand up to this national anthem because what's the point? And he proved a point by not standing up because it's just like, okay, that's cool. And I love Colin Kaepernick and I give him props and respect. But yet, a lot of people have like this pseudo good mentality, but which is really just submissiveness, and many of them just get angry because he did that. I'm like, so what? It's just a national anthem. Okay, I understand there will be some veterans and there will be some supporters of the U.S. Army that will be like, but that's our military, that's our national anthem. But can I tell you something else too? What's What's the U.S. national anthem onto a black person, Hispanic person, poor white, indigenous person, or Asian, especially if they're poor? That's creating like a type of submission. Think about it. No, really, think about it. Think about it. Because it's not allowing you to think. It's not allowing for you to think for yourself. In fact, it's just allowing you to just be like, okay, everybody else is doing it, so I'm just going to do it. And that's another thing too that submission causes. It doesn't give you the right to be an individual. Well, you don't need a right to be an individual. You could just be yourself. That's an inherent good of doing good. You become an individual. But by being submissive, you become a part of a collective. And oftentimes and many times, that's not good unless you're like a colony of ants or bees where all y'all have like a job or something. All of us have like a job. To some cases, you have to submit to things. But if it compromises good in order to look pretty, or to look very great in front of a country, especially if that country never gave a damn about you, then what's going on? Why? And sometimes I just wonder, like, do people even know the difference between what's good and what submission is? Because honestly, it seems that people nowadays get words confused. Yeah, you get words confused nowadays. That's not really good. And then all of a sudden now, it reminds me of a quote from Malcolm X, and this just sealed the deal for me. He said this, and this is true. Malcolm X said, "Don't be so blind to patriotism that you don't even know the difference between right and wrong is. What is right, is right, and what is wrong is wrong. Don't be so blind to patriotism." And I'm not saying that patriotism or loving the country that you're in, you can love your country, but you can also call out on its bullshit. Let's just keep it real. And I'm a supporter of Black Lives Matter. And All Lives Matter, man, I'm just gonna keep it real, man, fuck them. Because they never really cared about all lives, because if they really did, they would actually support Black Lives Matter. But yet, they're just doing that as a counter. But when Zachary Hammond and the young white man, that young white boy that was 6, that got shot up in that car, where were they? That's right, they were not good people. They were submissive people. And submissive people can't even think for themselves. They just do, and they don't even think. Good people think. Hence why when you have a brain, you think. That's good. And if you don't think, you're just giving into submission, which is not good. But then you got people that will just submit to people because they either have money, status, or just overall resources. But yet, really, and I'm gonna call Dr. King. And apparently, people were not good in the head. Like, to have a good head means to have a good brain, or to have a good sense of knowledge. He said this: "I want to live in a nation where my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." That's powerful, right? And a lot of people use Dr. King as a way of being themselves, and we're saying like he preached peace. Now, think about it like this: when you use Dr. King in that sense, you gotta delve deeper into it. Now, that quote, even though it was a part of the "I Have a Dream" speech, if you really listen to it, that shows you the definition of what the difference is between submission and what good is. See, I would not live in a nation where my children will not. I want to live in a nation where my children won't be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of their character. So, he doesn't want a nation where people are submissive towards the people, even though they look just like them. He doesn't want to live in a nation where they'll just be judged by their outward appearance. And sad enough, some Americans who claim to love and listen to Dr. King, quote unquote, didn't even catch that. And then forget the other part, to go by the content of their character. When you don't go by the content of one's character, that's when you fall into submission. Because you fell into a ruse, you fell into a mirage. And then you look at the outside, or just the pretty face, but you don't look at the character, who they are and who they will be. That's good. You got to focus on the good, you got to focus on the character, you got to focus on the internalized aspects of a person, and thus you can understand the nation. You can understand the nation. Sorry about that. But that's all I got to say. And to quote Malcolm X again, don't be so blind to patriotism that you don't know the difference between morality and just following orders. What is right is what is right, no matter who says it and And what is wrong is wrong, no matter who says it. And with that, YouTube, I gave you my take on the difference between submission and good. Hope you have a great night tonight. I one. Hope y'all stay up, be up, and do good. All right? Don't be submissive. Be yourself. All right? Later.